Good night, everyone. We are very happy and pleased to have you here on the CNFO Leadership Institute to do this second module of 4 being facilitated by Mr. Mitchell Lee. So Mitch, you can take it over from here.
All right, thanks a lot, Nadine, and good night to everyone. We want to welcome you to this second module in this 4-module set of training activities that are designed to be very practical in terms of the Virgin Island fisherfolk moving towards a network or some sort of a representative organization structure. So we started with the whole previously with this group process towards registering or formalizing an organization, and we discussed quite a few things there in terms of what some of the things that are required by a group before they really consider the registration process. Now we are continuing with the whole idea of what does the group want to do in terms of organizing itself in order to achieve the objectives that the group would wish to achieve, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Well, all three. So tonight we're going to focus on just things about organizing yourself into a structure that would allow you to, operate and promote the development of your objectives as you set them forth. So the things that we're going to look at tonight include organization design. So we're going to discuss what are the things involved in designing an organization. So you have a group now, and you want to form an organization, which is a structure that is defined to achieve the objectives. So we're going to discuss a little bit about organization design. And then I want to introduce some types of organizational structures to you so that you have an idea of the different types of organizations that are there in the way they are structured. Yes. And then I want to discuss for some period of time the whole idea of finding or creating a purpose-sensitive organization structure for Virgin Island fisherfolk. So after we looked at those things, the implications in terms of designing and some examples of organization structures, we want to look at some practical discussion in terms of what would be as a good fit for what the Virgin Islands want to achieve. What is a good fit organization structure? And then, of course, we want to just link the whole idea that you need to have some operations, and those operations impact your structure as well. So that is also important. Yes. What you intend to do impacts your structure. So even if you decide on a structure now, when you start to do different things, you have to adapt that structure to suit the things that you're going to do. So we really want to look at those things as well. Now, I want to start with organization design, because with everything, before you have something, you have to plan what you want to have, and then design it, and then build it. Yes? So we want to start with organization design. Now, I have a little quote that I've made it up, so it's not a quote. It comes from me directly, that a group with a purpose will organize itself to satisfy or realize that purpose in a manner that utilizes the resources, human, financial, technical, and the relationship that it has or has access to, bearing in mind contextual realities. And the statement is simply saying, in the context that you are in, so you're in the Virgin Islands, you're governed by the laws that govern the Virgin Islands, you have a particular type of fishery. Yes, you have a particular type of social and cultural reality. Yes, so that's contextual stuff. Bearing those things in mind, the group having a purpose will organize itself to satisfy that purpose. But that organization will take into consideration the resources that you have at your fingertips as well, or in your whole hand. And those resources include human resources, financial resources, and technical resources. But I also include the idea of relationships as a resource. I know sometimes we don't look at it like that, but relationships can be leveraged if you have the right organizational structure that allows for those relationships to have an impact on your operations. So the group, in designing its organizational structure, places some emphasis not only on those tangible resources, but those intangible resources that bring tangible results, like relationships. So I wanted to introduce this particular issue of organization design with those thoughts. We bear in mind the resources, including relationships, that we have or we have access to. Because sometimes we don't have the resource, but we can identify a pathway that allows us to access the resource. Yes? And we must always design our organizations in the context of where we are, who we are, and where we are. And that is critically important. And I can see the importance of coming out in every single group that I've worked with that have tried to organize themselves. The contextual realities. And if you don't take them into account, they can work against you. But if you bear them in mind, you can use them to work with you. All right. So designing an organizational structure in this current climate, and particularly having some lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, requires a keen look at some realities. And I just listed some of them here. So some things we must bear in mind when we design in the organization. The design must allow for the organization to be purpose-driven and focused. So you can be purpose-driven, but really running all over the place. So you want an organizational structure that clearly identifies purpose and is structured to run in the pathway that is focusing on your purpose. So you not only need to be purpose-driven, but you need an organizational design that allows you or promotes you being focused. Yes, and this is true whether you're a market-based organization structure or a service-type organizational structure. Yes, but you also bear in mind the fact that when you think of designing an organization structure, it must allow for some dynamism. In other words, it must be dynamic in a way that it can be responsive. So if there are changes in the environment you work with, if the contextual realities change, then the structure must allow for some response to that change and allow for some ability to do new things or to do old things differently. So that dynamism is something that should be built into organizational structure or borne in mind when you're designing your organizational structure. And then the organization should be agile. And agile as in terms of learning, adapting, and positioning. And as we know quite well, the situations in which we operate change sometimes. Sometimes they change slowly, and sometimes they change very rapidly. For instance, in this season, we've had climate change issues just over the last several years. We have, serious NGO involvement in fisheries matters, even though they are not directly impacted by the results of their operations. These are things that require an organization like a fisheries-centric organization to be agile. So we need to learn about these things. We need to be able to adapt, and we need to be able to position ourselves, but not just position ourselves and learn, but do it quickly and efficiently and effectively. So that agility needs to be considered when you think of designing a structure for your organization. And then, as I spoke about relationships in the statement earlier, you need to embrace empowered networks. And you need to design your organization so you can leverage the relationships that you have. And I mean, this does not mean that you have to structure your organization to include the relationship or the other entities that you can have relationships with. But you structure your organization in such a manner that those relationships can help you in to be purposeful, purpose-driven, and to help you maintain focus. And there are many examples of these type of things, and perhaps we'll have some time to look at them in the context of CNFO. You know, embrace empowered networks and leverage relationships. Well, I'll just give an example briefly. So the CNFO has embraced the World Forum of Fisher People, which is a network of fisher organizations at the global level. And this is an empowered network. And we leverage that relationship to bring about results in different areas. And that relationship has augured well for us in terms of exposing us to some other partners and having, you know, partnerships where we can directly access funding for some of our activities. So this idea of being able to embrace empowered networks and to leverage those relationships are critical in terms of when you design an organization. And remember, this is in the current climate that we have, because a lot of times in the past, organizations at the national level have excluded the reality that you can embrace empowered networks to help you with purpose. So instead of being in a silo, your organization design allows you to do other things. And this can be simply in the term of a liaison officer or some other relationship management officer, something like that in your structure that is different, but includes public relations. So that idea of embracing empowered networks and leveraging relationships is something that we would like you to consider when you're thinking about your relationship structure. Yes. And then we have as well, sorry, but you need to be digitally sensitive. Now, 20 years ago, this was probably not something that would have been considered very as a high priority thing in designing an organizational structure. But in this age, when you design an organizational structure, you must be digitally sensitive, because practically everything is transmitted or facilitated digitally. Even your signature to empower somebody else to do something for you can be digitally acceptable. So you certainly need to be digitally sensitive. So we looked at a few thoughts in terms of organization design. So they must have purpose-driven and focused objectives. The structure must include some dynamism. We should consider being agile and flexible. Yes, we should embrace empowered networks. It must be digitally sensitive. So those are some things that we really want to consider. And then within the organizational structure, we need to consider things like specialization. So your structure should allow and utilize the special skills that exist within the organization without interference from the dominant culture. And this is particularly important in organizations that are driven not by financial stability, but by volunteerism. So when you have people volunteering to help the organization promote its objectives, this issue of specialization is critical, because if you don't encourage and utilize special skills where people are offering for free by having a dominant entity or culture by a particular person or a group that negates that, then the organization suffers the loss of those specialized skills. So the whole idea of specialization is important. And then coordination. I mean, the idea of ensuring that within the organizational structure, you can carry out a task within a unit so that people are not only engaged, but they don't have to cross boundaries to know or to be active or to give information. And then the whole idea of knowledge and competence. And this is about not putting square pegs in round holes. So responsibility should be matched to the best fit, both within in the context of a person or a team. Yes. And of course, the whole idea of coordination and control, manage, you must ensure continuous engagement, but at the same time, you cannot have a free-for-all situation if you're purpose-driven. So there must be some issue of, control and commitment. And then the whole idea of innovation and adaptation. And this is the flexibility to adapt to a changing world. The flexibility to adapt to a changing world. And we're talking about agility here, yes? And then, of course, we deal with things like good governance issues in organizational design. So communications and transparency, the idea of having knowledge and information effectively shared and both easily and readily available. And this comes down to the whole idea of how you structure the organization so that these things are, considered and they work as being beneficial to the organization moving forward. And if we look at this, we can easily realize that if we in our organizational structure allow for all of these things to have some impact on the organizational design, then of course it would promote an organization being much more responsive, much more adaptive, and of course those things promote success in terms of the organization satisfying its objectives. All right, so now, as I said, after we discussed a little bit about organization design, and I trust you have, a good idea of some of the things we need to consider in terms of organization design. We want to look at some examples of organizational structure. And I think I have about 7 or so. I'm not sure of the exact number, but I have a few, and I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. Yes, bearing in mind that I really want to spend a little time discussing creating an organization in the Virgin Islands in terms of, how do we create or design one. So we have some notes on design. Now we're going to look at some examples of structure and examine some of the pros and the cons of those different designs. So we have an hierarchical organizational structure. So there's hierarchy. And this is best represented in a pyramid type shape where you have the highest level of management at the top and you have clearly segmented areas of lower management until you get down to the employees, which we call them floor level employees, because I don't like the term at the bottom. And I say that to you because if we go back to organizational design, we do the best fit where it's needed. So we look at floor level, if you would call them that. You have management, you have, higher up management, and then you have the real top leader. So a real pyramid. Now, the pros of this is that there's clarity regarding roles, authorities, and responsibilities. And the pathways for reporting are clearly defined. This type of organizational structure also motivates. You can see clearly where the next level is. Yes. And it also allows for each unit or person to be specialized, which promotes camaraderie in units or departments. So it allows for, some good relations in the organization at those levels, at horizontal level issue. May not do the same in terms of vertical. So there's increased bureaucracy, which is negative. and it slows down changes and innovation. And I want you to be clear about that. So this pyramid structure is not very agile, nor dynamic. It slows down changes and innovation. And then it also allows for silos to be created, where there may be departmentally focused units that are not really company focused, not broad picture focused, but very silo oriented. And then the low level employees, which I term flow level, may feel like they're not really valuable and you know, and don't really mean that much to the organization. So these are some of the pros and cons of an hierarchical organizational structure. And then we have another organizational structure, and I'm not sure which one is in the next order until Nadine brings it up. Yes. So this is a functional organizational structure. And a functional organizational structure is not that pyramid shaped. So there's top management, which can be ownership, or a CFO that reports, CEO that reports directly to ownership. And then you have, you know, clear functional entities that are specifically oriented to a particular functionality. So you have like sales, production, marketing. And some of the benefits of this is it allows employees to focus on their role, because you're clearly placed in the area that you are expected to function, and there's clarity on that. It encourages specialization, and that would be easy to see. And it helps teams and departments to feel that they have an impact in their particular role, because they're very centralized. So clearly, you know, sorry, not centralized, they're clearly departmentalized in a sense based on functionality. Yes. And then you can scale this to any size. In other words, if the company grows, you just add another functional organization, a part to the organizational structure. So if you wanted to add processing, production, processing, marketing, sales, then you could just add that. The company is growing, so it allows you to easily, you know, scale up the organizational structure. This also can create silos within the organization, but it also hampers interdepartmental communication, because people are based on functionality as opposed to the whole end result, but clearly just they're part of that complete product or service. Yes. So, and it does obscure or doesn't have much clarity in terms of processes and strategies for different markets and different products, because everybody has their own little line. Yes. So this is another type of organizational design, which is functional organizational structure. And then the next one, I'm not sure if it's departmental or horizontal. So this one is horizontal or flat organizational structure. Now in this structure, you just have a boss and everybody else at the next level. So, I mean, this has no real hierarchical setup, no departmental setup. And this is common a lot in small companies that are just started. So you have a boss or owner, and he just hires people to do different things, not departmentalized or anything, but they just staff operating in different areas of what he wishes to do. So this is a horizontal type or flat type of organizational structure. Now it gives employees more responsibility, because then they directly report to one boss. Yes, it does foster more open communication because everybody's at the same level. It improves coordination and speed. So this type of organizational structure is flexible, and it can be quite dynamic as well. But the flip side is it can create confusion, since there's no clear supervisory role. There's just functional rules underneath one head. Yes, in other words, and those roles can overlap. So there's some confusion there, because then, well, they're defined as in a functional organizational structure. So in a flat structure, there's some possibility of creating confusion because, I mean, and this happens, and I'm sure you have examples of this, where in an organization like this, we have a boss and just employees that are assigned to different things. The boss may call you one morning and say, well, hey, I want to go do something else. I'll go and help this other person, which is totally outside of what you've been doing for the last 5 weeks. Yes. So it can create some confusion because there's no clear supervisory process. But it can also produce employees with more generalized skills and knowledge. I think that is actually a plus for the person, but not necessarily for the organization in a sense, because that flexibility does cause confusion sometimes if it's not focused in the organizational work. And then it can be difficult to maintain this type of organizational structure, because when the company grows, then you need to have some clarity, or else confusion causes you not to progress as much as you can because people are doing so many different things, one person. So sometimes you really cannot focus a person or an activity because you need people to do many different things. So it can be difficult to maintain this structure because as the company grows, there is need to really ensure that production is consistent and that you're timely and those kind of things. And you can't have a lot of cross referencing or cross activity from one person. You need to focus on being productive. So some of those are some of the advantages and the disadvantages. And then we have, and I think I'm not going to guess, so Nadine will put up the next one. So Nads. Divisional organizational structure. So this is a structure similar to functional organizational structure, except that each division can have its own set of the same things that the other division has. So it's a little different. Yes. So you're actually making, mini companies in different places. And this is particularly suited to organizations that operate in a variety of places or different places at the same time. So you have a divisional type of organizational structure. So like Kentucky have many different little companies all over the place, like a franchise, and it's really a division because they all have one main company, but each of the different divisions operate fully in all the areas of operation. Yes. So this helps large companies to stay flexible, allows for quicker response to changes or customer needs, and it promotes independence and autonomy and a customized approach. So even though you all do the same things in different locations, you can adapt to contextual realities each division. So it allows for those kind of independence and autonomous type of operation and customization. But it can easily lead to duplicating resources in terms of, say, R&D, research and development. So if all three divisions do the same R&D development process on the same thing, then they're actually duplicating resources when we could do that at a different level and have all three benefit from that type of work. So we can see that this can, lead to duplication. It can also mean that there are communication issues between the headquarters and the divisions. And perhaps we understand the whole idea that communications require some acknowledgement of receipt in order to be effectively carried out. But a lot of times that is deficient in effective communications. So Division 1 receives a communication, Division 2 the same communication, Division 3 the same communication, but they all interpret that communication differently. So that is something that can be a problem because of the independence of each operation. And it can result in a company that competes with itself. And this is easy to see in the reality that each division carries out functions that are really similar. Yes, and therefore, if operating without a keen coordination effort between divisions, you can actually be doing the same thing and trying to get the same results from one market. So you can actually end up competing with yourself. So that's about divisional organizational structure. And then we have, I think it's probably 2 or 3 more that we want to look on as well. So we have a matrix organizational structure that is possible. And in a matrix, I mean, everybody's just around doing different things in different places, but connected. So in a matrix, you can actually pull resources from different areas of the company to work on, say, a project. And they come from different parts completely. So that is why it's termed like a matrix. It allows for that flexibility to draw resources from many different areas to achieve maybe a particular short-term objective or some other objective, or to carry out an activity more efficiently or effectively, or to be more holistic in an approach for something. So the matrix organizational structure allows for that. Join resources from different parts of the organization to achieve a task or to provide a service. So it allows supervisors to easily choose individual based on needs, and it gives a more dynamic view of the organization. So the organization has a lot of flexibility, it can move resources and people throughout the organization to create impact. But it also encourages employees to use their skills in different capacities in addition to the original roles. So this is quite a flexible type of organizational structure, the matrix organizational structure. But it can create a conflict in that when one department wants to draw from another department, then you have issues of conflict in terms of people needing people, particularly between managers and project managers. So a project may require 3 people from 3 different departments, but some of the managers also want their people to do other stuff. So there's a possibility of conflicts there. And then the whole idea of the change can, more frequently occur than in the other types of organizational structures. And change sometimes is not always beneficial. I mean, change can be a negative thing as well. Change doesn't always bring about good results. And we should all know that from our personal experiences as well. Yes? So that frequency of change is something that can be good, but sometimes it can be definitely working against us. And then we have the network organizational structure. I'm correct now, Nadine, because I think we only have 2 more. Oh, team-based. So we have 3 more. Team-based organizational structure. Yes. And in team-based organizational structure, you have clear definition of what people are doing, and they're placed exactly in their role capacity, just with a management mechanism, which is also part of the teams. So in team-based organization, we increase productivity, and we also increase performance and transparency, because the management team is also part of each of the teams. So we have that breakdown of silos. So because everybody knows what everybody is doing, because management team is part of the management team is part of every other team. Yes. So it produces a growth mindset, because everybody is actively involved in what we're doing, because we are part of the team in this area, but we're also part of the management. So we understand the full picture and our role in that full picture. So it promotes a growth mindset, because you're involved, both at the production or the initial activity level, and also at the management level and adaptation, etc. levels. Yes. It changes the traditional career models by getting people to move across. So you move from management to team and things like that. So it changes the career models in a sense, and it places a greater value on experience rather than seniority. and sometimes this is critically important when you're looking at purpose-driven organizations, because experience, skills, and knowledge are what you use to effect positive impact or to get success. And seniority doesn't necessarily represent the best value in those all the time. Sometimes it does, but not all the time. So that is an important positive. It requires minimal management outside of the management team. So it requires minimal outside management that is above the team process. Yes. And it fits well with companies that have flexibility. Yes. And teams that are push teams that need to get things done. Yeah. But it goes against the natural inclination to be purely hierarchical. So, it goes against the natural drive to want to have a big boss, a smaller boss, a smaller boss, a little boss, and then employees. It goes against that. Yes. And it makes it difficult to identify clear upward mobility pathways, because you're part of a team to achieve an objective, and the only way you can move from that team is into the management team. So there's not a clear, and that may be a rotating role as well. So the promotional pathways are, less clear. Yeah. So those are some of the negatives. And then we have, I'm going to guess this time, we have network-based organizational structure next. See if I'm writing that in. At least I can get something right. So we have a network-based organizational structure that is possible as well. Yes. And this is a web of relationships in companies that are physically close to each other and also physically separated from each other. And this allows companies to be flexible, allow them to be agile, to be able to adapt, to learn, to move, yes, to position. And it gives more power to all of those involved, both to collaborate, to take initiative, and to make decisions. And it helps to make work employees and stakeholders understand the process. So the network type of organizational structure, engenders a type of activity that promotes communication and understanding and, a buy-in sort of situation. It allows individual entities to realize the benefits of a large organization without the need to manage a large organization. And this, I think, is quite an important sort of positive in terms of a network organizational structure. Because, so what we take, for example, the Virgin Islands. So in a network type of organizational structure, the small organization on the islands can benefit from a large organization that comprises of all of the islands in terms of having two people from that large organization represent all of the people in the small organization at the national level, whereas the small organization doesn't need to have a national level organization that can do everything. So it benefits from having that larger organization in terms of the services that it can have, both in terms of representation, both in terms of capacity building, and in terms of getting information, etc. So the large organization comprising of smaller ones brings benefit to the smaller organizations without the smaller organization having the overhead of running structures that would allow them to get those things as well. So those are quite interesting things when you think about a network organizational structure. The disadvantage is it can quickly become overly complex, and this is particularly important to note, particularly when you deal not so much with many different types of organizations, but when you deal a lot with many different types of things. So take, for instance, the complexity involved if you had a network in the Virgin Islands that had to deal with like 10 different urgent pressing issues with government at the same time. So these processes could be in different locations as well. And therefore that complexity would be something that would be difficult to address. So that is a disadvantage. And then it can have the whole disadvantage of not having the individual entities or employees in the organization understanding where the final say lies, who really says what, that defines where we are. So those are some of the disadvantages. And then the final organizational structure that I want to look at is a virtual organizational structure. A virtual organizational structure. Now, in a virtual organizational structure, as you can imagine, I mean, all of the operations of the company in relation to its employees, etc., most of those are done via the digital world and the internet, etc., ICT. Yes. And the only organizational overhead is the issue of headquarters location and the digital network. The company avoids, or the company organization avoids, the burdens of employer-employee relationships. And when it says that, there is a small burden of employee-employee relationship, but it avoids the larger burden of employee-employee relationship, which is then placed at the level of operation. So for instance, a virtual organization like the CNFO only has a small headquarters, 2 staff, yes, and the burden of employee-employee relationship only rests with those 2. But we use people from all over the network to do things. Like the chief is in Barbados now doing some stuff, yeah. So it avoids that larger employee-employee relationship burden while receiving the benefit of having that relationship. It also facilitates planning, implementation, and control. And it leads to strong teams that focus on project goals. And that is assuming or bearing in mind that we're talking about a virtual organization where all of the members in that organization and the employees are digitally connected effectively. And I want to stress that because a virtual organizational structure can have its challenges if the members in the network are not effectively digitally connected. So that is an important thing. So that's an assumption here. Yes. And then some of the disadvantages, the issue of like quality control can be a problem because different entities in the network can be at different stages of growth and different stages of quality assurance. Yes. So the whole idea of the service you bring can be challenged based on which part of the network is handling it. So that issue of quality control is something that you have to look at in virtual organizations. And then the whole idea that an individual entity in the network can drop out at any time because they have individuality as well. Yes. And there's an example here on the internet I found of Uber, experiencing some severe issues when some of the drivers decided they were going to leave. Yeah. I mean, a virtual organizational structure, you can leave when you want. Yeah. And then of course the idea of quality control, and then there's some requirement for project tools and support. And this is why in a lot of virtual organizations you have this program coordination effort, or coordinating effort that provides those tools. Yes, and not just the coordination, but the support that when there are issues in the network entities, there is support to deal with those issues and to help with the whole idea of coordination. So I wanted to share those types of organizational structures I mean, there are quite a few of them. I thought it was important to go through most of them, simply because they give us some context in terms of what is there in the real world that people are working on, the type of structures. And it also gives us an idea of what may be best based on the purpose of the Virgin Islands organization. So for the next couple of minutes, I really wanted to think about those that I've, shared with you, and not be limited to thinking that it has to be a particular one. Be conscious that these types of structures exist and are possible to have, but also be conscious that you can also create your own structure based on your purpose. Bearing in mind that it can be a combination of any of these, it can be a particular one, or it can be several at the same time. Yes? So I want to discuss creating or finding an organizational structure that the British Virgin Islands fisherfolk, or the Virgin Islands fisherfolk, would probably seek to have. So we want to have a little discussion on that. So Nadine, I just had a slide that we can look at some discussion of this. Yes. And I brought back some of the things that we looked back in we discussed earlier in terms of what are desirable when you're designing an organization structure, and some of the principles that need to go into that design. So I've put them on one slide so that we can discuss, what kind of a structure may be suitable for the objectives of a Virgin Island Fisherfolk Network organization, or being national organization, or whatever you may call it. Yes. Now, in our first module, I spent quite a lot of time on trying to encourage you to consider articulating the purpose that you would want to have the group. Why is it you want to have the group? And I shared from the scoping report some of the things that were clear in terms of your desire from a regional perspective. And these were not from a national or island perspective, because the island perspective in terms of purpose is very different. I want to know that. But from a shared perspective in terms of a representative structure that would encompass all of the islands, I shared the scoping results. And what I've done here is I had to come up with some sort of a purpose in order for us to discuss how the organization structure could possibly be created or designed. So I am not suggesting that this is going to be your purpose. I just took these out from the scoping results because you've not met to really define your purpose. But assuming we have a purpose like this, to promote unity among fishers, provide collective representation, address negative impacts to fishers' livelihoods, and develop the next generation of fisherfolk. If you have a purpose like this, then your organizational structure will be designed to satisfy that purpose, or to promote the achievement of that purpose. And that purpose has like 4 clearly distinct areas of focus. Yes, the whole idea of unity, the idea of representation, the idea of dealing with issues, and the idea of capacity development or succession planning. So there's clarity on what this organizational structure. I'm just proposing this just for the purpose of our online discussion. Yes, not suggesting that this is going to be your purpose, but I've taken them also from your scoping report, just my understanding. So I don't want you to think I'm imposing a purpose on you, but I need to have some idea. I need for you to understand that in order to design your organizational structure, you must have a purpose. because your organizational structure must be purpose-driven. Desired characteristics, purpose-driven and focused. So when you design your structure, it must be purpose-driven and focused. It cannot be purpose-driven if you don't have a purpose. And the second thing is must be dynamic. So responsive and willing to do new things or old things differently. Yes, so that dynamism should be built in. Agility should be built in. The whole idea of embracing networks and leveraging relationships and the digital sensitivity. So those are desirable characteristics. And then some principles that may be critical to consider when you're designing your organizational structure include the whole idea of encouraging and utilizing special skills and negating interference from dominant culture. And this is something that is important. And I want to recommend to you that when you consider your leadership structure in your organization, in order to negate dominant culture, instead of having a dominant leader who has any final say, you have a group leadership process that has the final say. Because a lot of times we have personalities that create a dominant culture that stifle the progress of organization. This is just a reality. I mean, I'm not trying to hit anybody. This is just a reality in working with organizations. And this hampers the progress and success of organizations. So specialization is an important principle. And then the whole principle of coordination, that is carrying out activities within, clear defined role and teams, etc., and eliminate cross-boundary issues. So you don't have to be running across different tracks in order to get something done. You have a team that is coordinated, bam, and that team could comprise, people from different islands, different areas, etc. But that coordination activity principle is critical. And then the whole idea of knowledge and competence. And when I put knowledge and competency in terms of principle, it not only includes the idea of matching responsibilities to the best fit, but also developing those responsibilities as times go, developing those capacities as time goes on. So inherent in knowledge and competence is not only the idea of utilizing the best knowledge in the best areas, but also improving that knowledge as well as a focus area. And then we have control and commitment, the processes that manage the balance between effective control and continuous, productive, and innovative engagement. Yes. And of course, innovation and adaptation, the flexibility to change, to reposition, etc. Yes. And of course, we want good governance in every organizational structure. Communication, transparency, and that is the whole issue of knowledge and information being effectively shared and easily, readily available. So I brought us back to these things because when we think of purpose and we think of these desirable characteristics and the principles, we can then start to look at creating an organizational structure. Yes, that would promote success in achieving the group's goals and objectives. So what type of organization would this look like? And I want to discuss that for maybe a couple of minutes. We do have some time. Because I'm going to go to the operation part pretty quickly, but we do have some time we want to spend on this. So Nadine has another screen that we're just going to maybe fill in while we discuss it, if you like. Yes. So I had some thoughts on what I consider something we can start the discussion with. Yes. And it's the whole idea of a virtual network. And that is also has some team issues in it. So it has three different things embodied there. The whole idea of virtual network organization, the whole idea of a network organization, and the whole idea of a team type of organization. So it's virtual, it has a network type of structure, and it has a team type of operational reality. Yes. So this is just a suggestion from me in terms of contextual realities. This is just something that we can look at in terms of contextual realities. And I wanted to bear in mind that as I discuss this is just an example of the process that I think you should engage in based on the knowledge that you would have acquired and the other knowledge that you have before. Yes, that this is just an example process doing for organizational structure design. So I'm not trying to impose this structure. I'm just suggesting that, hey, if we have a purpose that looks at those 4 areas that we talk about, the whole idea of unity, the whole idea of representation, the whole idea of the dealing with issues, and then succession planning, then across islands and including regional and global. So leveraging relationships include those things, yes? So we look at the virtual component because the virtual component is important for you to operate simply because you're diverse in terms of geographic location. So there's practically no way you can escape the digital world if you're going to form a network organization in the Virgin Islands. That's just a fact. Yes? And then the whole idea of networking with the suggestion that each island has its own individuality and its own independence in operating at that local level or island level. And even within an island, it may even go down to a site level as well. So in a network type of arrangement, you have that independence and autonomy at the island level, and that independence and autonomy can also go right down to the local level, a beach level, or a site level. Yes, where an organization may exist as well, right? So, and then the whole idea of team, because what happens is if you have a networked organization that represents all of the islands and the fishers' interests in the Virgin Islands, in those 4 areas, then you need teams to work on the different areas. So you need a team to work in terms of building the unity component. And you need a team to work on the whole idea of identifying and responding to fisheries issues that negatively impact fishers' livelihood. And you also need a team to do the representation process. Yes, as well as a team to work on succession planning. Now, this could be one person could be involved in different teams, but there will be clear identification of those teams. Yes. So that is why I'm saying to you, when we look at the contextual reality, the fact that we have clear purpose in different areas, so we need people focused in those different areas that are specialized, who have clear responsibilities, but also the network structure allows for communication, coordination, things like that. Yes. So I'm saying to you that you can create your own type of organizational structure. Yes. So what would this really look like is something that we'd have to map out. But I could imagine that it would have a headquarters, which is small. There's a very small staff, but directly linked to all of the islands, which provide a overall management type of structure. So you have that team management process, which is above the headquarters issue. The headquarters would be more operational stuff. And then that team management process is a virtual thing completely, like CNFO. CNFO's management structure is completely virtual, comprising of the 17 members of the National Fisherfolk leading primary fisherfolk organizations throughout the country, different states. And we have a small physical headquarters that is not a leadership entity, but an operational entity. And that is based in one of the islands, one of the states, yes? And then there are delineated responsibilities. For us, we have an executive structure that has clear roles in different areas. So we have a treasurer role, we have a secretarial role, we have a liaison officer role, we have roles like that that are clearly delineated for team consideration, yes? But each of the islands or each of the states that make up the CNFO, which is a network, organized virtual network, each of the state operates independently as well, in addition to being a part of the CNFO. So they not so much divisional, but completely autonomous, but linked in a relationship. Yes. So the relationship that the islands have with the main CNFO body allows them to benefit from the things that the larger CNFO organization can bring, such as representation, information sharing, capacity development, that the smaller organization in the island itself would have difficulty to benefit from, because not only of size, but because of limited resources, etc. And I give you some examples. So CNFO has been able to work with CRFM to develop the Caribbean Community Common Fisheries Policy. And in that policy, we have clear, identified directions that have come from fisherfolk. So there's a benefit. So fisherfolk interests are represented in that policy structure. And it goes beyond that to the small-scale fisheries guidelines as well. I mean, fisherfolk are the one who's embraced for an ecosystems approach-based type of principle in fisheries management, because ecosystem-based fisheries management includes people as the central beneficiary or objective, bearing in mind that we must have responsible management, we must have sound ecological foundation, and things like that. Yes, so we see benefits from the bigger network organization accruing to the smaller units. So I wanted to just discuss that, and I wanted to have some comments based on the presentation so far. What are your thoughts? I'm going to open the floor. Nadine is going to lead in this short discussion series, maybe 10 minutes or so, before we look at administration and operations. So Nadine, over to you. Let's hear what the fisherfolk themselves have to say about an organization structure, and what process would they want to engage in to first deal with purpose, so that they can then look at the organizational structure. So over to you, Nadine, to guide this small discussion session. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thanks, Mitch. Good night once again. If you're still here with us, raise your hand or say hello, so that we know that we still have you here. Mandel, Christopher, Brent, Claudius, you're here. Kelly, and Kia.
I'm here.
What about the rest? Ken,
Yeah, I'm here.
are we sleeping?
No, I'm here.
All right.
I'm here.
Okay. So do we have any comment on your ideas? Because I'm sure you already had ideas of how you expected the structure of your organization to work. So would anyone want to comment on that idea? explain to us the idea you have about the structure of the organization we are trying to set up in the Virgin Islands. Anybody want to comment on that? Chanel, Kia, Kelly? No idea? If you have your organization already, can you describe that to us? If you're in a fisherfolk organization, or if you had been in one that has stopped operating over the years. I really now believe that people are here with us. Nobody wants to comment.
Anybody from Virgin Gorda who could speak to the Virgin Gorda Fishing Cooperative? I know in Tortola, you all are looking at registering an organization. You want to share anything on what you're looking at in terms of a structure for that organization? Rondell, I see you're unmuted. I don't know if you wanted to share or if you just happen to be unmuted. Claudia said he's never been in a formal fishing group. He shared any chats.
Okay, right, good.
Yeah,
So,
sorry, I was just gonna say if you're not feeling chatty, you could also put your comments in the group chat. I could read them out.
Folks, I want to remind you that no comment is a bad comment, right? So we all can learn from the comments that you will have, and I'm sure people if they have concerns. So whatever comments you need to make, you don't have to be worried about offending or being opposite to anyone. Just give us your comments. That's why we're here. We're here to listen.
Thanks, Adrian. And if you have a question too, remember we have CNFO representatives here. So I mean, if you're curious about their organizations, how they are structured, how that's been working for them, feel free to ask questions. So you don't have to just comment. Brent is new to this. So Brent, do you have, sorry, in the chat, Brent is saying, I'm new to this. So Brent, do you have any questions? So maybe Mitch or Adrian or Nadine. If you're curious about the CNFO experience in terms of how they structure the organization, maybe how they started and what kind of ups and downs they might have experienced before they finally came to where they are at now, whatever piques your curiosity. And again, feel free to type in the chat.
What you doing? What you
Hi,
doing?
give me a second, baby. Hey, good night. This is Tia. I think that the various organizational structures are actually good. I don't see anybody that is a part of the Virgin Gorda Fisherman's Corp over there. Sorry, my son is in the background. But so I don't see anyone from Virgin Gorda who actually has a corp that might be able to speak about it better. But being that they have so many different types of organizational structures, being that each island has a different group of people or a different type. Hold on, baby. they all have a different mindset. I'm pretty sure that one of each of those organizational structures would be fit for each of them.
Yes, but here, you know what would be interesting? So if all of them got together, what would that structure look like?
That's a good question. I guess you would have to basically look at all of them that were presented tonight, go through the pros and cons again, and then basically do the process of elimination to see which one would better suit for like the unity front instead of like the actual individual organizations.
So that is very important here to separate the fact that the individual organizations like the Virgin Gorda Fisherfolk Cooperative would have a different structure than the one who it is a part of. Yes. Because
Right.
its purpose would be different. So I say the Virgin Gorda Fisherfolk organization has as part of its purpose the whole idea of marketing and things like that. Yes. Whereas a lot of the purpose identified or the reasons people would join the representative one didn't include that. You see what I'm getting at? So the purpose would be different, and the purpose is what you use to define the structure. Yes, well, part of it.
Right, I agree. And it's just good that especially like the presidents of each island, well, I think most of them are present, that they can be able to see and would determine, I guess, maybe go back and speak with their team to see what structure will work best for them. Because what's good for you might not be good for me. And everybody might have something different in mind as to how they want their organization to structure. But then I'm guessing the 5 persons from each island who will form the unity group, they would have to come together now and figure out an overall organization as to what will work for the BVI.
Beautiful. It looks as though we've gotten at least some, you have at least good clarity. Yes?
I'm
Great.
trying.
Thanks for your input. Thanks for your input, Kia.
No problem.
Thanks, Kia.
But I would certainly love to hear from the others, Nadine.
It's almost like I need to do a mic check to see if we can unmute and ensure that we have people behind these names, because there's no eagerness to comment on the structure except Brenton. He's new, so he's learning, and Claudius never been in a formal fishing group. And from Kia, how about Chanel? Chanel, you have any thoughts on this at all?
It's good that you can hear from
Good night,
from Abby also.
Basically, I think the purpose should be defined, should be I don't know. I think in my opinion, the purpose should be collective among all islands of the BVI. I think it should speak the same language. The verbiage should be the same for all islands. That's my opinion. Whether it's going to be that way or not, I don't know. In terms of the organizational structure, I thought the second one was pretty,
I have to go back, Chanel. Yeah, you moment.
I can't remember the name of the second organization.
Right.
I thought that one was pretty defined.
Okay, let us speak. Are you speaking to this one?
No, wait, hold up.
Structure,
Yeah.
functional.
Functional organizational structure was no, the flat, no, definitely not the flat. The functional organizational structure was appealing to me, as well as the team-based organization. But he has said if is going to be defined by island, then I think if you go back to another slide,
Network, virtual,
no, uh-uh,
matrix, divisional,
no, might be,
horizontal,
no, never,
functional,
no, go forward.
hierarchical. I think this was the first. All right.
Never.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Maybe no, or matrix might be a bit more appealing. Let me see. What's after matrix?
6. They said this. Okay.
Yeah, every
7,
some type of, but collectively I think we should all speak the same language.
okay.
As to different aspects that would, you know, I guess work differently on each island, that would be the difference in business, I guess. But the organizational structure should be collective, or at least the purpose should be collective between all islands. That's all I have to inject. I think the purpose should be collective between all islands. Ultimately, that's our foundation.
Very
Yep.
definitely so. Very definitely so, Chanel. Very definitely so. Without
Yeah.
purpose, we're not going anywhere at all.
Yeah, I mean, we can have a springboard from other islands. They can have a springboard off of the purpose. They can define different roles, different objectives that's suitable for each business. I call it a business. I don't know what else to call it. Each island, because you know there are different things that operate differently, you know, everywhere. But the purpose must be the same. We have to be in harmony on that purpose. And if that's not collective, then I don't think we're gonna have the same language. That's just it. That's my input.
Very
Excellent.
good. Thank you. Mitch, I want to see if Kelly is there.
Okay, go ahead.
Kelly, I just want to check if you're there, if you can unmute. Kelly, you're not with us? Maybe you're not with us. Ronell, I think Ronell tired.
I'm sorry, Amelia. I can hear somebody snoring. That's
It's
just,
Ronell. I'm sure it's not me.
no, it's not you.
Oh,
So we can actually move forward. I think we have enough of an understanding, and this is one of the things I wanted to gauge from those who have, you know, provided some feedback. At least we have some understanding that there are different types of organizational structures that exist, and these structures can be examined in relation to purpose in order to find something that is suitable, both at the island level, and then there must be a very clear, commonly defined purpose at the united level in order for that united organization to function. And that clearly defined united purpose is also part of the purpose of the island organizations, even though they may have other objectives in their operational business as well. So it may not define the entire purpose, but it is part of their purpose. Yes, so I'm confident that that has been clearly understood by those who have provided some feedback.
Yeah, correct.
Yes, excellent. So perhaps we can spend maybe 5 minutes or so on the whole idea of administration and operations, because as was clearly noted by Chanel, if we don't have purpose, the other things cannot follow. We're really not going anywhere unless we define purpose. And I'm trust that those who are here now understand why I had actually, in the first module, offered CNFO's assistance to help you with the issue of purpose, even if it's just providing the medium for you to do the discussion. I mean, whatever, because we don't want to in any way influence what you want to be your purpose to be. We just want to facilitate the process that you identify and articulate purpose, because from purpose, you can do the other things. Yes, including administration and operations. Everything else flows from purpose. All right, so according to the dictionary, to administer is to govern, to manage, a public or private business or whatever, you know, to administer, to govern. So a business or an organization, etc. Yes, and it is a direct attempt. It's a direct attempt to make the best possible use of the resources available in order to achieve the goal of the enterprise. And that is about satisfying purpose. Yes? So administration includes all the operations of the organization. Yes? So it's the way we organize things to facilitate the running of the business. So that's why I use the term administration and operation, because administration is that broad suite of things that allow the business to operate or the organization to operate. So what does administration do? It ensures that there's unity of action, that there's discipline, and that there is some level of anticipation or hope, that there's activity, that there's order, and it exists in all parts of the organization. Administration exists in all parts of the organization. So in addition to those, it also deals with the whole idea of recruiting, organizing, and directing. So the membership or the employees, depending on the type of organization that we're dealing with. Yes. Administration also ensures good relations between the different levels or scales or departments within an organization. And in the context of some fisherfolk organization, ensures good relations between the members as well as the external stakeholders like fisheries departments, governments, NGOs, etc. Yes, as well as international or regional bodies. So it is directly involved in the coordination of all efforts towards achieving the overall goal. So administration is a critically important component of every organization. It is geared towards satisfying the members or the owners, satisfying labor requirements, satisfying management and statutory requirements. And these are particularly relevant when you formally register an organization. So when you formally register an organization, you immediately acquire statutory obligations, which the administration of the organization must satisfy. So these are critical issues in terms of administration of an organization. Next slide, Nadine. So why do we need it? And these things should be quite obvious. So it's aids in succession planning. It allows the organization to have institutional memory. And this is what record keeping is about. It's about institutional memory. So the organization as an institution records for the purpose of retrieval at some point in its archives all of its organizational documents. So it requires a filing system, yes, that ensures that all the documents related to the administration of the organization So that includes not only the operations in terms of physically doing things, but also the financial records, also the capital investment records, also the records relating to assets, etc. And these are not just financial only. So assets have different facets to them. So they have a financial asset component, but there's also something else, something physical about an asset as well. So a record could be descriptive. It could also be numerical, as in a financial statement. So this institutional memory and organizational documentation that administration is responsible to ensure that happens is critically important for institutional memory. Yes? And it also records all the information about what is going on in the company in a manner that allows it to be easily accessible to those who have the privilege of being able to access it. And this is critically important in terms of organizations where there's a level of volunteerism. People want to know that we can access the information when we want it, and not that information is difficult to get. That discourages particularly volunteer people who volunteer the time. I mean, if they're not comfortable with the fact that they have access to the information required and the information that they generate, then they become discouraged very easily. Yes, so that whole idea of accessibility, transparency, and things like that, administration is responsible for. But the reporting also makes, the recording and reporting also makes for the satisfying of legal obligations. So when you have a good records keeping system that administration deals with, covering not only operations, but every aspect of the business or the organization, then satisfying legal obligations are easy. And legal obligations include the whole idea of financial reporting, but also of leadership reporting, because a lot of countries require that you send in a list of the leadership of the organization, the actual names of the people. So, I mean, these are important things that you need to understand why you need to have an administration and operation component. And these are the implications when you have an organization. Yes. And then we have the whole idea of the components of an administrative operation system. So you develop policy and procedures that guide the organization and its development. And of course, we speak to the whole idea of records, you know, and all aspects of records, appraisal, retention, disposition, etc. And then the whole idea of managing files that are not active to make sure that they're accessible. Yes. And then as well as management of active files. And then you have the whole idea of digitization and graphics, you know, reproducing graphical information and storing things in micrographics form, things like that, or bringing micrographics into a readable format. And then of course vital records management include quite a lot of things, I mean, that are critical, particularly financial, but also reports pertaining to operations that are descriptive. And then you also have the issue of training and outreach in an administrative system, and succession planning is inherent in this. So all of these components go towards building a strong organization and towards having an organization that can be focused on its objectives and its purpose. Yes, Nadine? Some of the documents that are actually produced in an administrative system are here. I mean, and we would be, familiar with some of these, other types of associations and jobs, constitution, articles of association, etc., policy and procedures, financial records, and the whole gamut of financial records, your assets that you have, including vehicle and property and things like that. And of course, in organizations that have members like cooperatives and associations, the membership records. And then you have the whole idea of operational files that include work documents, things like that. Yes. So those are all in terms of administrative documents. And then succession planning is also a critical function of administration. And this is a strategy for passing on leadership roles to employees or group of employees. And in the case of most fisherfolk organizations, to members or groups of members. Yes. So this is really a critical component, and CNFO has actively engaged on this whole idea of succession planning by having leadership training activities on an annual basis for the last several years, which will continue this year. So we start to train the next generation, and as well as training leadership in country as we're doing now. So I think that's most of what we wanted to look at tonight. And I know our time is gone, so I'm gonna stay here for now. Thank you.
All right, Mitch, sorry, just to share a comment from Chanel in the chat. She said, that's why I believe the functional organization chart is best, as it provides separation of duties / accountability. There, oops, this is blocking me a bit here. There, hold on. There's a check method system that can be implemented to ensure the organizational components are met. So that was from Chanel.
Excellent. Thanks, Chanel. But I know ultimately, your leadership would have to, and including yourself, would have to really discuss this and decide on one. But definitely purpose first. Great. So Nadine, I hand over to you completely now. I think I've tried to do what I should do. So I'll leave the rest up to you. Well, and Melanie, of course.
Yeah. Well, Nadine, just I think before you, I don't know if you had something specific you want to say, but I just wanted to ask about the start time for Thursday's session, just to confirm that with the group. So I'll just give way in the event that you have something else to share.
And just for the purpose of ending this call recording, we're going to say good night and follow with discussion for the upcoming session.